my name is Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, Savage Reads. I have had some great reads this last week that I'm really excited to talk about, so let's just jump into those. So this first book that I want to talk about was a recommendation from the channel Tofukado. I picked up A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. This book is very much your typical horror, possessed teenage girl kind of book. And it was very gripping. You watch this teenage girl through the eyes of her younger 8-year-old sister, and this teenage girl is obviously having some severe mental issues, and you watch the toll that it has on the family, and when they decide that maybe she's possessed and that they need to do an exorcism. And I think that this book, you probably would like it if you like those movies, because I feel like it's trying to address and maybe subvert some of those horror tropes of a possessed girl and what that actually means. Are we watching somebody who is struggling in a supernatural sort of way, or are we watching and being entertained by the breakdown of someone's mental health and their family? This was a really good one, but it definitely hit my limit of where I'm okay reading in horror. I think I want to step down from it. So personally, I haven't had a huge problem with reading horror books because I don't picture it as vividly as if I was watching it, and I feel like I'm not, terrified and feel like I can't sleep. And this one just hit that limit of just being a little too much for me. And so honestly, I don't recommend it if you aren't into horror already and feel like it is something that you can handle, because there were a lot of really triggering topics and it could be rough at times. Was it gripping? Absolutely. I couldn't put it down because I needed to make sure that these young girls were going to be okay, and it was awful, but it just was like a little too much for me. I found where that line is, and that one was just a little too much on the creepy factor for me, and so didn't really love that, but I did think it was really well done. I liked how the book was bouncing between the recollections of the younger sister as well as these blog posts that are dissecting this trope, and I thought it was actually pretty effective. So overall, good one. Just proceed with caution, because for me, it was a little too much. So this next book was a recommendation from Scott at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and I picked up Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugent. This book is following Sally, and she is just a little strange, and she doesn't really know why, but she just can't seem to grasp the world in the same way everyone else does. And when her father dies, very beginning of the book, before he died, he had said, "Oh, when I die, just put me out with the trash." And they usually incinerate their trash, so she just took him out and tried to incinerate him. And everyone is so shocked. Why? How could she do this? And she just is a little bit different. She's not processing things in the same way. And this book is following her story. After her father dies, she is going to live her life. She's in her 40s. She is going to live her life for the first time and have to make these connections, make friends, go out of her comfort zone, do things she didn't think she wanted to. And I kind of adore that kind of story, and I rooted for her so much, which is why the rest of it was more palatable, because you find out the reasons for why she is the way she is, and you go into her past. And I don't want to spoil anything, but it was very disturbing and very, very gripping. I could not put this book down. I had to know what happened, and mostly because I cared so much about Sally as a character. I think this was so successful in making me really just fall for Sally. I thought she was such a delightful character, and I was rooting for her so hard. Her making these strides to go out and get therapy, to get the house of her dreams, to make friends for the first time, and it was lovely. I loved that. But then meshing it with this dark past and this gripping thriller that you have to know what happens, and it was so good. This was 5 stars. It was so good. I couldn't put it down. It made me think about a lot of things. I don't want to spoil it because I really think you should read this book, but there were just so many things that I had to just think about and process after. And I think my only complaint is I wanted this book to keep going. I think it left off at a moment that I understand why it left where it did, but did I want more? Did I want to see Sally's life? Yes, 100%. And so I really liked this book, but I really am just, I'm stuck. I'm going to be thinking about it for so long. So if you've read this book, let me know. If you haven't read this book, read this book and then come back and tell me, or make your own video and tell me. I would like to know more what you think about this book because it was very different. Now, Erin at Erin Read a Book recommended the book Stiff: The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers by Mary Roach. And this book was written back in 2003. And so I do think you have to remember there has been further research and further things that have happened with dead bodies since then. But this still was so interesting. It's going into different ways that bodies are used by science, different things that can be done with dead bodies, what happens to your dead body. And Mary Roach does not shy away from being gross. And that can really work. Just be careful if you're, reading or listening to this while eating, just, be a little careful there. But it was fascinating. Now, I had also read the book Gulp, Adventures on the Alimentary Canal a few years ago, and I also really enjoyed that one. These are great poppy science books that kind of get into the nitty-gritty of what happens with your body. And she has some other books along similar veins, and I enjoyed this. Now, it did make me think a lot about some of the books that I have read about death recently. What I was really comparing it to was the two Caitlin Doughty books that I have read. And it was very interesting to me that these are books that talk about what happens after you die, and there wasn't a ton of crossover. I think you could read both of them and learn so many new things about each. I did read that book, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory, and that really focuses on the process of embalming and cremation and what happens to you typically after you die, where Mary Roach really focused on if you donate your body to science and what we use cadaver parts for. And that was very interesting. I also read Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs by Caitlin Doughty, and I enjoyed that one, but that also didn't have a ton of crossover. It was more your weird and off-the-wall questions about death. It also made me think a lot about a book that I read last year called All the Living and the Dead by Haley Campbell. This book went into a deep dive on the people involved in the death industry, from crime scene cleanup people to embalmers to all these people who deal with the dead. And that also surprised me how little crossover there was with the Mary Roach book. I think all of these books you could read and learn more about death in completely different ways. I've actually been rather pleased about the assortment of books I have read about death and how interesting it is and what to think about how you want your body to be treated after you die, what your views are and what is meaningful for you when your loved one dies, what good can you do after your death. I think these are really fascinating questions. And so highly recommend any of these. I think that they are very worth picking up if you're not too put off by talking about death. I think it's something very interesting to try to face and think about in your life. Now, the last book I want to talk about was a recommendation from Melinda at A Web of Stories, and so make sure to check out her channel. I will link it down below. And I picked up The Last Ranger by Peter Heller. This book is following a park ranger at Yellowstone National Park, and he is dealing with the normal problems of people getting too close to the wildlife, drunken, disorderly conduct, but also some poaching and maybe a conspiracy to mess with the national parks. And he's trying to figure things out at the same time grieving the death of his wife. And you get this mystery thriller, but it's very drawn out. Honestly, the reason you read this book is because it had gorgeous descriptions of national parks. It really made me feel like I was in Yellowstone, and I don't think it gave you a moment where you could forget it. and the writing was really lovely. But did I think that I really cared about the characters or felt that the plot was super involved or compelling? Not really. I never was really rooting for anyone in this, but the way that the author put you in a location was great, and national parks are wonderful. Great. I love all that. I thought that if you are going to Yellowstone or going to a national park and wanted to read this while you were there, you might have a really great time. I think you just need to not be looking for a ton plot-wise. Yes, it's a thriller, mystery, and things happen, but did I ever care? Not really that much, but the descriptions were lovely. So I'm a little bit meh about this book, but it does make me want to go to Yellowstone. So mission accomplished on that one. And that is what I have read the past week or so. If you have any thoughts on these books, please let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you all on the next one.